How would you strategize your hunts based off the studies you've done?
Well, so far, it has nothing to do with moon.
You said it here first.
I think some of the most, well, let me start with the basics. Unless we find something that supersedes this, I don't think we do, but I'm always going to remain open-minded. Nothing supersedes sun up and sun down. Nothing supersedes the greater movement response we see during the rut. Now, what I have really enjoyed looking at, and again, this is our environment, so I cannot say this translates to Ohio or Wisconsin,
Sure.
but where we're at and what we see with these affinity to food plots. I mean, deer are visiting food plots. There's no question about it. When they visit, it all depends on hunting pressure. Natasha, who again I referred to earlier, she ran a really neat analysis looking at the frequency of visits to food plots. And what she found is that throughout the year, September to October, and really for us, our cool season food plots, they're really being planted and really starting to germinate and grow October and then November. But when when bucks really started hitting the plots more often was during the rut. And so you might be thinking, now wait a minute, bucks, I can't imagine them spending a whole bunch of time on food plots during the rut. They're supposed to be breeding season. But what she found is that there was a whole bunch of visits to food plots as much or even more so than during the post rut. Now remember, the post rut, that's when the bucks are supposed to be focusing on the food and regenerating their body. Well, the devil was in the details there. The bucks were going as often or more often to those food plots during the peak of the rut, but the duration of time which they stayed there was much less than during the post rut. So when you broke it down to how long and their behavior while they were on the plot, the bucks were visiting the plot to look for estrus does.
Yep.
They're running the circuit. They are looking for breeding opportunities. In the post rut, they are visiting the plots and actually eating. So all that to say to the question is, when we put together some of these videos and over a year, and we find that these food plots, and a really good one is going to be 3 to 5 acres. Really good one. That's where we found that more often that is where the bucks were going to. They are really anchors on the landscape. And so just thinking about what are my highest probability areas to be during the rut. It may not be sitting on a plot. It may be finding a corridor that is linking 2 or 3 plots together. So looking at the landscape, and I got 3 food plots, what do I think is the habitat corridor that would be linking that to where a buck could go scent check this plot and then go scent check another plot? That's probably the biggest thing that's changed with me from these data.
All right.
That's awesome. I think that's a great overview of the motivations of a deer. I mean, we often call it in hunting hubs, like just a centralized area of activity. And I think you make a really good point about deer moving to gain information during the rut on does, and then you're putting yourself between 2 areas of the highest likelihood that they'll end up, and you're maybe catching travel from 2 different areas simultaneously because of it.
And you have a real advantage if you are in a landscape where corridors are very defined.
Yeah.
So if you are in an open landscape with corridors that are linking up these food plots, you got a really, really big advantage. If you're like in most of the Southeast where it's forest land and there are those little holes in the forest, you know, every couple hundred acres, and there's a food plot, it's more difficult to concentrate deer. And you don't even have topography in a lot of these places. It's just flat land and it's forest. So it's hard to concentrate them in my mind.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think we're kind of fortunate in like our areas where you get some, especially in areas with a lot of topography, you can really define those locations that just kind of funnel movement. I feel like most people will refer to them as like rut funnels around here. That's why you hear a lot of people talk about them in the Midwest.